A riveting witness taking the stand today at the Delphi double murder trial. Hello, and thanks for watching ABC 57 News here at 5. I'm Brian Conybeare. A Delphi woman who says she saw a disheveled man soaked in mud and blood the day Abby Williams and Libby German died, describing it all today and getting grilled by the suspect Richard Allen's defense attorneys on cross-examination as well. ABC 57's Annie Kate is covering the trial for us. She's live in studio with today's key testimony. Annie?
Yeah, Brian, another round of long-awaited testimony this morning, and one that some say got quite contentious, from an eyewitness who says she saw a bridge guy looking muddy and bloody on 300 North, the road with an entrance to the Monon High Bridge Trail, the day the girls were killed. Her name is Sarah Carbaugh, a Delphi resident who said on the stand, quote, "I'm as local as you can get," end quote. She testified she walked the trail daily with her dogs, and on February 13th, 2017 said, quote, "I saw a man covered in mud and blood walking along the side of the road," end quote. This road, 300 North, that leads to the Mears entrance to the Monon High Bridge Trail. Carbaugh said the man was walking west, adding, quote, "I looked at him, but he did not make eye contact with me." Later, watching the news, she saw the still image released of Bridge Guy and said she recognized him as the man she saw on 300 North. She also found out Libby and Abby were missing because of an Amber Alert. She didn't contact the police for 3 weeks, saying, quote, "My inaction was me overthinking and panicking. I was having a moment," end quote. In cross-examination, defense attorney Andrew Baldwin brought up Carbaugh's old police statements, saying she never said the man was bloody, but she affirmed she did. The defense also pointed out an hour of her interview is gone. Carbaugh, getting defensive, said, quote, "I understand you're doing your job. I saw a man on the side of the road with mud and blood, and that's that," end quote. The defense continuing, saying she initially said the man had a tan coat, not blue. Jurors asked plenty of questions too. How wide was 300 North? How old was she? How did she know it was blood? Her fiery testimony, which had some back and forths with Andrew Baldwin, ended a little after 10 a.m. Now, coming up on ABC 57 News at 5:30, I'll tell you about the testimony from the man who conducted Libby and Abby's autopsies, and a new filing by the defense trying to get their Odinism theory back in court. For now, live in studio, Annie Kate. Brian, back to you. Brian, exactly. The defense of Richard Allen filed a motion this morning trying to get evidence for their alternate murder theory back in court. Now, the theory you just explained, that Abby and Libby were actually murdered by Norse pagan Odinists in a ritualistic killing. We heard the evidence in pretrial hearings, evidence like the way sticks were laid on the girls' bodies and the way blood showed up on a nearby tree. They argue these could be ritualistic symbols, but Judge Gull ruling in September that they could not provide a connection between Odinism, their list of suspects, and the crime scene, so she prohibited that evidence from trial. But after Brian O'Leahy's testimony, where he discussed how the sticks were placed, saying it was a human act, it seems the defense is using that as their opportunity to bring the evidence back in. Now, of course, the motion was filed this morning, and with Judge Gull in the courtroom, she probably hasn't reviewed the motion yet, let alone ruled on it. But we'll keep you updated. Now, back to today's testimony. Next on the stand was Dr. Roland Kaur, a semi-retired forensic pathologist who conducted the girls' autopsies on February 15th, 2017. He went into detail about where the girls were cut on their necks, using drawings of the major blood vessels before their actual autopsy photos were displayed for the jury. Kaur testified it was clear Abby had been lying in that position on her back for a long period of time. After all, he says, it takes about 8 hours for livor mortis to set in, and Abby's body had clear signs of livor mortis, or blood settling in areas of the body after death. Abby apparently had one gaping wound to her neck. Libby had up to 5 separate cuts to her neck, some with other marks nearby that had him initially guessing a serrated knife had been used, but said, quote, "I was unsettled because they weren't classic serrations," end quote. Kaur testified it could also be marks from the handle of a box cutter, perhaps, and the defense claimed he hadn't shared that change of opinion with them. Crucially, he said he could not determine a time of death with precision, but it was roughly 40 hours before the autopsy, and it may have taken 5 to 10 minutes for the girls to die after their throats were cut. Defense attorney Brad Rosie is suggesting that was enough time for them to scream or react if airways weren't obstructed. Now, these are gruesome details, but they matter because the defense will try to argue there was more than one killer and possibly 2 weapons used, and they believe the girls and their bodies were moved. So the prosecution is trying to show it all could have been done by one person with one weapon and that the girls stayed put. Now, I'll be back here at ABC 57 News at 6 with the state's last witness. Live in studio, I'm Annie Kate. Brian, back to you.
ABC 57's Annie Kate is covering the trial for us. She's live in studio right now. Annie?
Hey, Brian, the final witness of Day 5, Indiana State Police First Sergeant Chris Cecil. Now, he looked at Libby's phone in 2019 after ISP got new equipment to access even more data than the previous phone extraction. On February 13th, 2017, Libby's phone last tracked any movement at 2:32 p.m., shortly after she took the Down the Hill video. Her phone tracked an elevation change as the girls traveled down the steep terrain toward the creek underneath the Monon High Bridge. Cecil did a second report this year as digital forensic technology improved further. There's no indication the phone was turned off. The phone got messages throughout the afternoon until about 4 p.m. Then there was a gap of time until suddenly at 4:33 a.m. Libby got about 15 messages all at once. Based on pre-trial hearings, the defense is planning to argue Libby's phone was turned on at 4:33 a.m. Cecil was not able to explain how all those messages from throughout the evening came in all at once, but did say there was no further activity after 4:34 a.m. The phone was found under Abby's body when the girls were found. In cross-examination, the defense argued phone data from Richard Allen cannot connect him to the crime scene. We learned investigators analyzed 23 of Allen's devices, but they weren't collected until November 2022, 5 years after the murder. Now, just like with most witnesses in this trial so far, the jury asked thoughtful questions, showing their attention to the case. Now, they do this by writing them down, giving them to a bailiff who gives it to the judge, who then discusses with counsel to make sure the questions are allowed, and then counsel asks the witnesses. Now, turns out Indiana is one of 8 states to allow juror questions, and it's been very interesting hearing what the jury wants to know. Live in studio, Annie Kate, ABC 57 News. Back